Searching for clues to discover God's mysterious plan for your family? Then don't change that dial. Join us now in our discussion of the mystery of parenthood. Here are your hosts, Trey and Stephanie Cashion.
Good afternoon. This is Trey, and that's Stephanie, and she's about to do it. And this is the mystery of parenthood. Welcome to another Wednesday with us, and we are live. All right, we'll begin with our prayer.
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Lord God, from you every family in heaven and on earth takes its name. Father, you are love and life. Through your Son, Jesus Christ, born of woman, and through the Holy Spirit, the fountain of divine charity, grant that every family on earth may become for each successive generation a true shrine of life and love. Grant that your grace may guide the thoughts and actions of husbands and wives for the good of their families and of all the families in the world. Grant that the young may find in the family solid support for their human dignity and for their growth in truth and love. And grant that love, strengthened by the grace of the sacrament of marriage, may prove mightier than all the weaknesses and trials through which our families sometimes pass. Through the intercession of the Holy Family of Nazareth, grant that the Church may fruitfully carry out her worldwide mission in and through our families. We ask this of you, who is life, truth, and love, with the Son and the Holy Spirit. Holy Family of Nazareth, pray for us. St. John Paul II, pray for us. Yes, good afternoon. It's Hump Day, and you're with the Cashions on the mystery of parenthood. And we are a live show, and we'd love for you to call in. That number is 85-LOVE-RED-C. It is toll free, 855-683-7332. Or you can text in at 979-255-2633. And we're going to be talking today about that parenting is hard. There's a news flash for you.
That's a news flash.
All you parents out there,
So what we hope, God willing, and is to do a 7-part series that helps us get on the right page. I think we may have done this as a couple, maybe not as precisely as we'll try to do it here, but early on, due to many things that came our way, we've talked before about Gary and Anne-Marie Ezzo and the Growing Kids God's Way program that had such an impact on us, and then my by the grace of God, being able to get my master's in theological studies from the University of Dallas and study under Father Mitch Paquin, those greats that were there. All those things together kind of came, we need a plan. We need a way to attack our parenting. I think it became very evident to us. And maybe some of you out there have had this feeling that there are no instruction manuals. And how in the world are we supposed to manage this child? And what are we supposed to do? And what will we be judged by? And I know that we've gone through quite a bit, Stephanie, of figuring out what is not just what's the standard, but how do we gauge what's happening? Because we've talked before about sometimes you gauge the way your kids behave against the way other kids behave, and that can be a big mistake, and it can be discouraging, or maybe discouraging like it was to us. Not because our kids are bad, but our kids come from us, and we talk, and we have tempers, and we're not
loud.
Always, we're loud. We might be even a little bit disruptive, but
what?
But I think that, and then when we look at other kids and we say, man, they're so well behaved, and then we look at their parents and we go, well, they're really well behaved and they're really soft spoken, and then it became more of an awareness of maybe that's not the best way to gauge that. And then furthermore, when we took that class, we had the issue of, man, they're saying if you do this plus this plus this, that equals an obedient child. That equals, this is how the kid will behave. And I mean, as I recall, we do all those things and they didn't respond always
It
the way
didn't
they're
quite work out like the book.
didn't quite work that way. And so then the other gauge is, well, maybe we're bad parents because, well, they said that this works and that. And then we realized, wait a second, unique and unrepeatable, they're all different. They come with different temperaments. They come with different personalities. We have different temperaments and personalities from the other parents. There's too many dynamics involved to expect that, well, if I do this, then that's going to happen. It's not that simple. You're dealing with real human beings, both from the standpoint of a husband and wife trying to raise kids and the kids themselves. And so how do you gauge that? Well, that's not a very good way to gauge. So how do you do it? And I don't know if I have the answer, but one thing that we're working with and that I saw, and I was looking at Jesus. So Jesus has spent all this time, he spent his whole life, and he's at the Last Supper. He's at the Last Supper, and he's ready to go. And he says, I'm going to a place that you cannot come, but you will come after me. And he said, and today I call you friend. I think that's what I think you want to raise a friend. That's the end of Jesus's being the person. You want to raise somebody who's a friend. They're not a friend while you're raising them. You want to raise somebody that you can look at and say, I want their opinion. I want to know what they think about this. And I trust that they'll give me, like any good friend, a real answer. And so if that's the gauge, then I do know this, we're not there yet, but we're beginning to see some of the fruits that might provide some success with that. Another thing is that we struggled with was again this idea that everything, if we do these things, then these kids are going to turn out, and everything was gauged in the moment. Did they obey immediately? Did they do what they said they were going to do, and all that? And then from a sacramental standpoint, this is where the mystery of parenthood came from. From a sacramental standpoint, what ended up happening was we started saying, wait a second, if we're meant to be image and likeness of God, if we're meant to be an icon of God to our children, how do God's children behave? And if you read the Old Testament, even the New, you find that they don't always act the way God asked them to. They're disobedient and they're sinful. So why would we expect that we fallen human beings would have any better outcomes than God himself has? We don't have everything that he has. And so what we hope to do is to say, okay, we're going to try to take what we've learned and hopefully learn some more going through it, and then package it in a way that would allow others to at least begin, because I don't think it's a journey. And there is maybe the destination if I want to raise a kid, but there's too many things to talk about. I mean, a temper tantrum happens in a context. That context can be something you've never experienced before, never seen it coming. Yeses and nos as parents comes in a context. Well, that may be something you've never realized. I mean, 10 years ago, even, would we have known anything about iPhones and texting and Instagram? And those are things that we don't know. And I suspect if technology continues to go, if we go 10 years out, there are going to be things that confront our children and confront us that we have no idea will be there. Maybe there's some people smart out there. Maybe there's some people that are technologically advanced. They might know. So what do you do? Well, I think part of what you have to do is first put us in a situation where we understand where we are. In business world, you'd say, you do a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Well, it's really important, I think, to start with wherever you want to start, but to have an understanding what are the threats and what is hard about it, so that you can acknowledge where you are. Because you got to know, this is where I am. This is where I planted as a parent in 19, goodness gracious, 2015, almost 2016. As a parent, you got to know where you are. You got to know who's on board with you, and you got to know where you're headed. So you have to have kind of a compass. It's more about you have to have a strategy. You have to have our strategies. You have to have a direction that you're headed and a plan that makes room for those things we can't see coming, which lays a groundwork that says, well, maybe my kids, I can't speak directly to that issue, but I can give them the way to think about an issue.
So basically characteristics and values that you want to
Right. And how do you do that? How do you do
Right.
that practically
right.
in terms of day to day? I think that every parent can be uniquely and unrepeatably themselves. Every couple can be uniquely and unrepeatably themselves. Every child will be the same. But there are principles, there are things that God has given us that are very clear that I think that we've had some level of success, not complete. If you've met us or our children, we are not
We're works in
saints.
progress.
We are very much works in progress, but we are somewhat veterans. We do, we have a 20-year-old and an 18-year-old and a
She's 19.
19. Oh goodness, 20 and a 19, and then some other
You're
teenagers
going back to
there.
1990.
But we're starting to go out of the teenager, one teenager down, another to come, and then 4 more in the next 5 years that will leave the teenage ages.
Right.
But given what we have kind of worked from a framework that whether, and the other thing is, Stephanie, I mean, believe it or not, we disagree. I mean, maybe somebody out there lives in a relationship where they don't disagree. We disagree about, well, what's the real problem? We disagree about how do we handle that problem? We disagree about those things. And the thing that has been able to do it is, I think, some of these philosophies, or not, I don't know if philosophies is the right thing, some of these strategies that we have to where we can actually talk through the issue.
I think it was a framework. I think that's what Growing Kids God's Way got us to do, was to sit down and be purposeful.
Right.
And it gave us a framework from which to work. And I think, as you and I have talked about before, a common language with which to work within. I mean, if any of you, again, I think a job is a good analogy. There's certain jobs that have certain languages. I mean, if you're a healthcare worker, there's, all kind of science words and prescription drugs and, healthcare words. And
if you're a banker, you have the same. If you're a CPA, and two
And
CPAs can talk,
right,
and they can talk over my head.
I can tell
two
you,
doctors can talk, and they can talk way over my head.
As a healthcare worker, to sit down with a banker, it's like they might as well be speaking French. I mean, I just, don't understand it.
But
so I think parenting is a job, and it's hard. And if you don't have a common foundation and a common framework from which you're starting, then I could see where, because even with our common framework, we could get into disagreements about things. But because we sort of had a common framework and common definitions of things that we were working from, it was somewhat easier to get onto the same page. And as a parent, I can tell you, one of the goals you want for your parenting with your spouse is to be on the same page, because
you have to.
They will, kids smell fear and weakness, and they go for the jugular.
Right. And when they smell blood in the water, it's all over.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what we hope to do is to take what we've done and kind of that framework and that language and try to share it with our listeners in a way that would help them to be able to maybe take it, but make it their own. In other words, that's one of the things that I think I don't want to do, which is what I felt like we had to do, is I had to act a certain way based on who was teaching me how to parent.
Yeah, I was going to say that, I think the one regret I have with the framework was my legalistic, kind of tendency. And so if we can encourage you in any way to, take what you hear, but pray it and form it in your own families, and figure out where it works and where it doesn't work. Our parenting got much better when we stopped trying to do things by the book, so to speak, and being super legalistic about, there's no formula. I mean, I'm just going to tell you, there, if anybody has a formula, they need to call in. Well, they need to come do this show.
Right.
They've got way more than we do because.
And I would say they're probably not being truthful.
Yeah.
Because anybody that deals with people, and particularly in close proximity, inside a house under one roof, knows that there are things that happen and there are differences. And it's not important that those don't ever happen. In fact, sometimes it may be important that they do happen for clarification, for whatever.
It's all teaching.
It's all teaching.
It's all an opportunity. When you look at it as an opportunity, there's no mistakes, there's no failures, there's no, it's all an opportunity to learn and grow as an individual and as a family.
And to be honest, that is what, and we'll get into this, is exactly what the church says, is that it's not, children aren't just given to us as the supreme gift of marriage for the sake of educating them, of procreation and education of children, which is the primary end of marriage. That's something that's been lost. Code of Canon Law says that the primary end of marriage is procreation and the education of children. That by itself, there are plenty out there listening who would totally disagree with that. But that is what the church has said. It's for us to do that. That's the primary end. There are many other ends, but that is the primary end. And so when we recognize that is it, the church also says that it is in raising these children, it's in fulfilling that goal that actually we are sanctified, that we are made more holy, that we are made more self-sacrificing. We are made more in the image of Christ to the extent that we give ourselves over to that primary end as a couple. And so in doing this, as God's perfect plan always is, it's multifaceted. There's a lot going on here, but God is involved and God is doing something with us. So it's not in living it out and having a common language, then we do it. So listen, each of us come, and this is something we'll address because it does come up, but not right here. But it is important to recognize that each parent comes from a different parenting background. Each parent, when somebody says discipline your children, we have some definition in our head and some picture of what disciplining your child looks like. Well, that may be completely different. I mean, Stephanie and I could not come from more different parents, both wonderful parents, both sets of wonderful parents, both longtime married, both they're a huge part of why we're who we are. But we have to come together and we can't just stand on our own and say, well, the way I was raised was the best way, the way you were raised. We've got to come and make it our own. And so that's one thing that we hope to do, is help people be able to do that. Because I'm gonna quote Pope Pius XI, because I think this is really kind of where we need to understand, in addition to what the Code of Canon Law says, that the primary end of marriage is procreation and the education of children. Pope Pius XI says this, and it's a little bit scary, but it kind of gives some, goal for us. Both husband and wife, quoting him, both husband and wife will regard children as, quote unquote, a talent committed to their charge by God, not only to be employed for their own advantage or for that of an earthly commonwealth, but to be restored to God with interest on the day of reckoning. We're not supposed to take our kids and kind of bury them, which that's one aspect, bury them and say, Lord, here they are. They're not dead. They made it through, In other words, we can do that. I mean, there is a temptation, particularly in the world, and we'll talk about the difficulties of raising kids today, to be that guy that receives the talent and then says, okay, I'm just going to protect them.
Not
and not let anything bad happen to them, and we're going to keep them here. And then when they turn 18 or 19, whenever, shove them out in the world and say, Lord, I did everything. There's something more expected of us than that. And we know that God will provide us with the means to do that. But we need to think about, what does he mean by, what does Pope Pius XI here mean by saying that he's got to be restored on the day of reckoning with interest? Well, I think part of it is we've got to take what God sends our way, and we're going to talk about that, and in and through raising our children, make them more than they would be had they not come through our family. Make them more than they would be had they not gone through the experiences in their relationship with us, right? We are meant to be something that makes our child, with God's grace and with some direction, more than they would be had they not been given to us. That's exciting. That's hard, right? In other words, there's nothing worth doing that's not hard. I mean, there's no benefit if there's not something hard. So we're going to start today with laying out kind of, well, why is it so hard? Because I think when we start to look at why is it so hard, you'll recognize, dadgum, it is hard. I mean, this is difficult because you don't have to rewind more than 15 or 20 years. And if you rewind 30 or 40 years, it's a whole different world that we're in. So we're going to start today with the why is it hard? And then begin to talk about overall what do we need to do, which will kind of go back to where we started this day about, well, what do we have to do that? And then the other 6 shows will be what we would say the secrets. This is the first secret. That it's not really a secret. The secret is it's hard. We got to start with it's hard. So why is it hard? Well, first off, we'll start with the easy stuff. The culture is different. When I grew up, I'm 50. When I grew up, the majority of all my friends' parents were married. I mean, the vast majority. It was odd to have a divorced friend. Even if they were divorced, both parents were still involved in their kids' lives. That's a total change. There was no even talk of same-sex unions or anything like that. So the culture itself, and the majority of the people in the world that we ran across were Christian, or if they weren't Christian, they had a Christian ethic about them. There were right things to do and there were wrong things to do. And so it was kind of ingrained in society as a whole that there are certain morals that we all have to do. Well, we know that that's not true anymore. As a culture as a whole, it's changed. So is it any wonder that we have trouble today? We don't have the guy next door who, back then, even if they were atheistic, they would not say it, and they might actually believe something that we would hold in common, like, do a hard day's work for a day of pay, that you're not given anything for free just because, that you take care of those who are in need. We might all agree on that as a culture on the street that I lived on, or even in the city that I lived in. But today, I'm not sure that that's there. So that's a pretty simple one.
I think it's more prevalent. I think the relativism is, the
right.
It's just
exactly what there would be a day when we'd say that's wrong.
Right.
There would be no excuse for that, and we probably would all agree. Whereas now you might hear, well, it's wrong for you, but it may not be wrong for me. Mm-hmm. That would be unheard of. That would just have been nonsense that many years ago. So this idea of relativism, I think, is prevalent. And when it's like that, then it's hard to say, well, here's the truth, follow it. Well, it's the truth for you, but that's not the truth for me. So that's one. Anybody out there experience this? Other parents who disagree with how you do it, or don't even take seriously the raising of their kids. At the very end of the spectrum, unfortunately, there are people who will father children and then disappear. That would have been almost unheard of from 50 years ago. Not unheard of, but it would be a very small, and they would be frightened.
And it was shameful.
Right.
You didn't have an unwed baby shower, which is very common these days.
Right. And so things have changed. Marriage is now by law something completely contrary to what we know and what the church actually teaches. That's different. So there's that, and you have parents that don't. You have parents who either don't know or don't really care or think, well, hey, let them go. What you're going to hear from us is that this parenting is a balancing act. It's not like, free for all, let's go do whatever. Let them go do whatever they want, but it's not a helicopter parent, I'm going to walk with you and stand over you and control everything you do for the rest of your life either. It's a balance somewhere in between. Part of that deal is you're going to deal with those parents who disagree with you on one end of that spectrum or the other. You're going to have a parent that they won't let their kids do anything. And you say, well, I think I would allow them to do this. Or you might have parents that say, well, heck, they're going to see it anyway. So let them go see it. I mean, it's stupid for me to try to do something that they're going to get in front of anyway. So other parents. So the culture's different. Other parents. Obvious things like we talked about. Kids are different. Personalities, temperaments. I mean, what works on one doesn't work on another. That's nothing that's changed over time. But I think one of the biggest things, before I go to this, obviously the spouses differ on that. That's a struggle, but that's been the same throughout time. But here's the one that Stephanie's brought up that I think really brings, because it allows all of these things to enter. She says that there are so many fronts there, in the image of a battle, there are so many fronts that we have to battle at now.
And that we have to monitor with all the technology and social media and kids' accessibility to information, right or wrong. I mean, it's kind of the running joke. I think I'm sure everybody's heard it. If it's on Google, it's true. I mean,
right. Yeah.
You can Google it. It's true. So,
but I think it is the multiple fronts. I mean, I remember sitting there we were going out on a date and or something, I can't remember what, but we were standing at the door and the kids were talking about doing a research paper and they were looking up a word to use or something. And both of the people, or the person I was talking to, I was like, can you imagine what it would have been like growing up if we could have done that? Because if we didn't have a dictionary or an encyclopedia or access to a library, we were out of luck. I mean, to find a word or whatever.
Yeah, kids don't go to the library anymore to do research papers. They just sit in front of a laptop.
Right, and they do all their research there. So the good news is they have access to that. The bad news is, how do you, with that attitude of if it's on Google, it's true, or if it's in Wikipedia, it must be true. We got to teach our kids something that very rarely happens. They have access to information that puts itself out there as accurate and true, that we have to teach them. We have to teach them that when they receive information, they have to be able to question it. Whereas when I was 10 or 15, there were very few there was very little access to me for things outside of my parents. There was very little access for information, and it was hard to get a hold of. Because information is so easy to get a hold of, you just plug it in your iPhone, pick a word, plug it in there, and you'll get all this information. Whereas I would have to, if I wanted to learn something, okay, well, do I really want to go to the library? Well, I mean, all you have to do is ask that question. And most people go, heck no. So you didn't go learn. You just asked Mom, what do we do? And if you did go, you were, because it was going to take work, focused on what you're going to get. You weren't playing around. You get on one of these. I'm pointing at my iPhone, but you get on an iPhone, and you'll read something, and then you'll go, oh, there's a link there. What is that? And then before you know it, you're off on something you never knew you were going to be thinking about, never had in front of you. And so it's very easy for any of us, but for our children to get quickly away from being focused on something and off on something else because of the way information flows. Additionally, they don't know how do you gauge? How do you gauge, is this true or is it not? I mean, those are things that I mean, really wasn't until I got to college when professors started saying, oh, you can't just say something. You have to actually go and find something to support what you're saying. You have to prove that what you're saying is true. heck, nobody's got to prove anything now. They just got to put it out there, and people will believe it. So I heard somebody say, who was I listening to? But the person said, everybody has a voice, but certainly not everybody is worth listening to. and so how do you help them decipher that? And the crazy thing is, we're not talking about college age kids. We're talking about 11 and 12-year-olds who, even if they don't have an iPhone or an iPad, will have access because you sign off on it at a school to that.
They've got friends that
who will assume who it will be assumed from society that they have access to the internet, and that you have to at some point teach them how to work their way through that. So it's not only the front of, okay, which families do we spend time with? What movies do we go see? I mean, those are things we had to do back in the day. Is that a good thing to read? But now we have to go as all these different things are bombarding us. And how do we fight that battle? How do we do that? I mean, what do we do?
Well, you don't have an account in our family, unless your mom and dad are your friends, be it Instagram, Twitter. Snapchat's a little harder because it goes away and it's,
right.
a kid,
Well, even
you
being
can't
aware of
retrieve
that,
it.
because frankly, my problem is, and this is something that, we've had a show on this before, but my problem is I don't like that stuff. So, I mean, I avoid it. So like Stephanie says, well, Snapchat's bad. Well, I'd start asking why. Well, they can post something or do it and it's gone.
Well, it's gone unless somebody screenshots it.
Gone unless somebody screenshots it. But it's gone from,
Yeah.
if I haven't seen it, from a parent being able to look
right.
at it,
Right.
I can't do it. So how do you manage those fronts? And again, I think the issue is this, and who knows what's coming down the road? I mean, there's just no way of knowing what's coming down the road. All we know is in information, good or bad, like sharing our values, not sharing our values. All those have access to our kids. Access that was never like that until recently. I mean, the last, I don't know, I haven't done the thing, but I mean, how long has the internet been available and how long have we all had PCs? It hasn't been 15 years.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
maybe it's 20. I don't know. But certainly when we grew up. So if you're feeling the tension of how do I deal with this, then hopefully this show will help you deal with it. But it's not going to be as simple as we'll just keep it away from them, because the bottom line is they have to learn how to do it, because that's what life is.
Right.
So,
and I know people who, have limited certain things and don't do certain things. And that's something you have to prayerfully consider.
And we'll have a whole section on setting limits and freedom. And
but I'm talking about like whether you choose to participate in what the culture has going on. For our family, we discern that, the kids, they're going to have friends who have, our kids didn't get phones until we homeschooled. They didn't need a phone. They were with me. So, they did not have a phone until it was a functional.
Like we needed to be able to get a hold of them.
And I really use necessity very loosely there, because we obviously survived without phones in middle school. But that's when we chose as a family that our children got phones. And initially they got the cheapest little flip phone, no data, and worked their way up. Our philosophy on that was that we wanted to walk that with them. And believe me, we've had some great opportunities to teach and to talk about, things that have come up on Instagram or Facebook. Well, not Facebook anymore, because that's just for old people, although they are getting back to it now. Twitter, all those kind of social medias. I don't know. I view it as an opportunity. It's kind of like laughingly call it mommy cam, because if you're friends with your kids and you're not if you should be, and I feel very strongly about that.
Yeah, well, you should have a strong personal relationship with your child.
I'm talking about on the media.
Oh, friends. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. No,
See,
no.
this would happen. You had somebody like me in here.
Yeah, no, the friend thing is at the end. I'm talking about friends in air quotes. Yes, with your children on social media, so that you can see what their friends are doing and what they're doing, and like I said, we've had lots of opportunity to teach and walk along with them on things that we didn't agree with or or agreed with, and so, but that's something that obviously that's what we chose to do. That doesn't make it right or wrong. You have to discern for your family.
And homeschooling, not homeschooling, that doesn't make it right or wrong either. It is
Your
private
family.
school. It is your family. But again, no matter what you do, to pretend like we don't live in a society and in a culture that allows our children access to information for better or for worse, and we don't make the time and the effort to try to teach them that. If we don't have one of the principles being, how do we help you discern whether this is right or wrong? Well, I mean, you got to walk with them. So we're going to talk about this. Some of these principles are accompanying your child, it's an apprenticeship where you're with them. That's one of the philosophies that we've had. One of the things. That's nothing new. That's not ours. That's the church's. That's how discipleship works. But that requires effort. And we're going to talk about, well, what does that mean and why do we do that? That's one of the things. But in this in particular, you have to do that because you can't just say, well, how do you know that's true? And then not help them figure out how do you know it's true. I mean, all their friends may be saying it's true. Whatever it is, pick it. But we have to do all we can to prepare our children for that. And there is a way, I think, or at least a philosophy, and we have some practical applications of things that we've done that we hope to share over the next 6 shows. Because we have to start with what are the threats? Well, the chief threat, I think, is not just the culture, not the fact that we, as parents, it is that our kids have access to, on a multiple of fronts, to things we never would have seen, never would have known, and it's just free-flowing into them. How do we deal with that? How do we work through it? That is probably my chief stressor. Is there are people out there who I don't know who disagree completely with me that, for better or for worse, have access to my kids. They and their information have access to my kids. And as good parents, I think we have to do it, but our answer is not just to shut it down. It's got to be because they're going to walk out one day, and whether we say no phone or phone, they're going to have a phone, right? So we have to teach them how to do with that. So we're going to go through real quickly kind of what we hope to do given those things. But I think, the difficulties that every marriage has, parents disagreeing on that, the culture that we've lived in has changed. Other parents and people that were, hey, well, they're letting Johnny do this, or he's getting to do that or watch that. How do we deal with that? Those are all things. But ultimately, the idea of same-sex marriage or no marriage at all, all those things, part of the culture, and the multiple fronts where our kids have access to information that we can't control are all why it's so hard to do a good job. I mean, it's where we are. Here's the good news. God put us here for such a time as this. He gave us children for such a time as this. We have to be encouraged to know that He knew this was coming. And He knew that you and me could handle it. He also knew it wouldn't be easy. And therefore, He gives us the grace of the sacrament to be able to do it. But we have to do something with it. We have to open the gift. And we have to trust that He's going to provide. The rest of this thing is hopefully an encouragement to say, you can do it. There is a way. There is the way. Who is Jesus Himself and everything that He's revealed that we're going to try to package into, here's how you do it. Here's what you need to have as a general framework, and then you make it your own. That's what we want to do. So be encouraged. We're starting with the hard stuff, but because that's where we're starting. But the journey begins now and heads towards an end. So what do we have to do? Number one, I think this is it. You have to have a plan, and a plan includes what's the destination. The plan includes from a principle standpoint, how are we going to make decisions? How are we going to discuss what's going on? You have to have a plan. We're hoping to help you lay out a plan over the next 7. You have to be proactive. If you go from fire to fire to fire, you're doing nothing but fighting fires. When in fact, proactiveness means you have to be purposeful. We've talked about it forever, but we're going to try to break that open. You have to be purposeful. I said yes to this because, and know why. I said yes. I said no to this because, and know why. Challenge yourself, and we're going to challenge you and challenge ourselves to be people who say, if I'm saying no to this, can I defend it to where it makes sense in the context of my parenthood, in the context of my parenting? Is it making my child a better person to say no? That's critical. So you have to be purposeful. You have to have a plan. All right? What's the end of that? Well, first, we all want to get to heaven. That's the chief end. But then the other end is we want to raise a friend. So we have to do that. So how do we do that? Have to have a plan, have to be purposeful, and to be purposeful, we have to have a vocabulary. There has to be a way of communicating as spouses about our children. We have to make time for that.
I think that's one of the hardest things. And we were very blessed that this Growing Kids God's Way program was given to us actually at a baby shower. So we were pregnant.
Right.
And so it was something that we did actually with each other. And then after actually having a couple of kids, we did it again with a group. And so, and it's an evolution. Like Trey said, it's a journey. So no matter where you are in your parenting, obviously, I look at some of these kids at St. Mary's and like I'm jealous of how far along in their faith journey they are as young kids with no boyfriend, it's just them, Jesus, in school. And, that's amazing. What a grace, what a gift. I didn't take that opportunity, unfortunately. I was married and pregnant and thank God it was a gift that was given to me before the child was born. But no matter where you are in your parenting, God still has a plan, and it's unfolding the way it's supposed to unfold. And so, figure out what that path is. It's never, ever too late.
No, it's never too late. And we hope that we'll help you provide a framework for doing that. That is the goal of the ones that we're going to do with regard to this. We want to share what helped us in terms of the way we looked at things. And believe me, Stephanie and I come from totally different, as I've mentioned before, but we've disagreed, but we've had to come to some middle ground on that. And typically, at least in our experience, I think Stephanie would agree with me.
Absolutely. I know where you're
the better options, the things that we've done better is when we've met somewhere in the middle.
Never all
because
him or all me.
Yeah, it was somewhere in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
It was so to be humble enough as a spouse to listen, even if you disagree with the other, because maybe God is actually leading you to come somewhere towards the middle on that. And I think that's just, it's critical that you have a vocabulary, because basically you and your spouse, we're speaking to people that are a husband and wife that are raising their kids, but you and your spouse are the two generals, so to speak. You're the two commanders that have to be on the same page to be able to confront these battles, choose how do we approach this, and how are we laying the groundwork? Because we've talked about whether it's talking about sex with your kids when they're older, or about what movies they should get. All of those things are, how do you communicate? Why are you losing your temper? Those are things that are communicated in a perfect world throughout the 18 years that they're at home. Right? I mean, because it's not just like, it's not momentary. It is a process that begins with small things, but always pointed in the same direction. And the better we are at understanding where we're trying to get, and the more clear we can be on what is the purpose and what are our strategies for attaining that purpose, the better we can be at doing that through small things that happen every day. And that's where it becomes meaningful. Because ultimately, you can have a plan, and you can be conscious and purposeful, and you can even have a dialogue. But until you catch the beauty of the fact that you have been given a child, and that you've been given the graces that you need, and all God is asking you to do is to dive in, and he's asking you, give me back that child with interest on the day of reckoning. When he asks you that, there's nothing more important than what we're doing for our own, as parents, for our own sanctification, for our own salvation. There's nothing more important for our children, their sanctification, their lives, than raising them and being involved. That is critical for us to embrace. It is difficult. It is hard.
And I'd like to encourage single parents as well, because that is, again, the reality in which we live. Obviously it's important for all of us as parents, whether, we're a husband and wife team or a single parent team, you're still a team, because that team as a husband and wife or as a single parent starts with God. And so, as a couple, you obviously need to be praying individually and bettering yourself spiritually but that's almost, and the same is true for a single parent, and almost to a bigger extent is that communication that you might be, that is relatively easy as a couple. You as a single parent are going to, you turn to God. That's your, I'll never forget in that course that we did, they talked about part of the communication between parents is, putting aside that time and maybe having couch time in front of the kids to show them, show them your unity, show them your communication, show them that you're talking and mom knows what's going on and dad knows what's going on. Well, as a single parent, you have that couch time with God and have it in front of your kids so that they know I'm not alone in this. I'm consulting.
Right. And all of the principles that we have, regardless, even if we're talking about vocabulary, are all things that a single parent can put into practice as well. That's a unique and unrepeatable. I mean, your being a single parent may be repeatable in the idea itself, but the situation that you're in is your own. All right. So these principles will all be the same. Now we're going to speak to what happens with a husband and wife because that would be the ideal, but the reality is we live in a fallen world. So in a fallen world, we have to know this, but I do think that we'll try to lay these out in a way that would allow someone to be able to do it. The other great thing is with growing kids, and I hope this would be it, is you have enough people that you could talk to people and use the same vocabulary, not just with parents, but not with spouses, but with other parents, and they would understand what you're talking about, right? I mean, that was healthy. That was good. Mm-hmm. Because typically right today, if you talk with somebody, what does discipline mean? I mean, what does it mean to discipline a child? I mean, that word itself carries so many different pictures in people's minds. To get on the same page with that and have people to do it. So even as a single parent, to be able to have other people that you can talk to about, this is my struggle with this, and then for the people to have some understanding of what you're doing. That's what I hope this will do is be able to provide a Christian Catholic language of parenting that embraces the fullness of the truth and provides people with the ability to go out and talk to others about their struggles and have the same language, which cuts down the amount of time that you can get to. You can't get to an answer necessarily, but you can cut through. Now, what do you mean by that? If we all know what we mean by that. So that's what the rest of them are. Now, we've got between now and the end of really right before Lent starts, so like February 3rd, I think would be the last one of these shows. We have 2 shows between here and there that I think are important. Number one, we have we're going to we've got Joseph White supposed to for December 2nd to talk about St. Therese of Lisieux's parents. And I think that'd be very helpful for us. For us and then for all who would listen. That's December 2nd as it stands right now. And then on December 16th, we have Marcel Lejeune, and we'll let you know more about what we're going to talk about that. There'll be a few other repeats, but between now and February 3rd, we're going to try to distill this down to where the people who listen can get a glimpse into what we went through and how we tried to raise our kids and what was our framework. And you can take that or leave it. All right. But let's go. We're at the end here.
My goodness, this show goes by so quickly some days. Well, remember, only God can help you take the mystery out of parenthood. Pray, parent with a purpose, and prepare for God to amaze you. God bless you, and please pray for us. We'll be praying for you.
And have a happy Thanksgiving.
Absolutely.
And, we won't be.
My
we
goodness.
will not be here next Wednesday. I mean, we'll be here, but
right. That's right. Oh,
we'll
yes.
be on the 11th. You'll be
have a
listening to
blessed
a rerun.
Thanksgiving.
God bless you guys.
Thank you for listening to this local production of Red Sea Catholic Radio. Tune in next week at the same time to hear Trey and Stephanie Cashion share more on the mystery of parenthood.